Can you hear them now? One of the United States' largest telecommunications companies launched a rebrand that has brought out many different types of opinions. Verizon Wireless worked with the creative agency Turner Duckworth to deliver what could be the most controversial rebrand of 2024. Verizon lets go of their iconic checkmark as a way to reinforce this trend of simplification in branding, and in its place, we have a new way to look at the letter V. Our thoughts ahead as we look at Verizon's new rebrand by Turner Duckworth. I am Ziggy the Designer. Design is all around us, so we might as well talk about it. Before we get into any of the changes that Verizon and Turner Duckworth made, let's look at where Verizon is coming from. In 2015, Verizon worked with Michael Barut's team at Pentagram to deliver Verizon's biggest brand overhaul to date. Barut is a design legend himself. I mean, he's in graphic design textbooks, and he's still designing. That's huge. I mean, space in design textbooks is usually held for dead guys, Massimo Vignelli, Paul Rand. So that just tells you how dominant Michael Barut's career has been. But back to design. Verizon commissioned Barut and his team at Pentagram, and they ended up where a bunch of other tech companies ended up in the mid to late 2010s, and that's with a simplified sans serif typography and a limited color palette. We can look at Google, Spotify, and Yahoo as examples of other companies that went this route. And generally speaking, these rebrands had, they had some mixed reviews. I feel like as designers, we appreciated what was happening, but the general public was a little bit confused. I remember there being tons of comments along the lines of, now the logo has no personality, or now this company looks like everything else. And that's very valid criticism. But as these brands grew and evolved, their visual systems became more refined and more strong. And that was the exact case with Verizon. So when I saw that Verizon went through a rebrand, I was surprised. And when I dove into the look even more, I became even more surprised. So let's get into the work. Turner Duckworth kept the typography more or less the same. It's still Neue Haas Grotesque, which, let's not be design elitists. It's pretty much the same typeface as Helvetica. So Turner Duckworth keeps Helvetica. They keep the typography the same. But they added a lot. They added a lot to the brand. Turner Duckworth introduced a new color to the brand, to Verizon, and it's this highlighter yellow, which I'll say adds a bit of youth, adds a bit of energy to the brand, which I think is great. They also add a new system with the letter V. The V becomes its own word mark here. The left arm of the V becomes this mask for imagery, for other graphics, and for advertising applications. I feel like this can be very strong. I mean, we see it with this poster where we have that left part of the V promoting football, promoting gaming, promoting music. So it's a very strong application already, even just in mock-ups. Speaking of the V, the V is also the foundation for this new pattern. It's this dynamic, moving pattern. I mean, even in static applications, you can feel that it's moving. The animation implications for this are incredibly exciting, in my opinion. I mean, imagine just a wipe of this pattern in a TV spot. I mean, it's highly ownable for Verizon. I don't see anything like this coming out of T-Mobile or AT&T. Staying with the V, they also introduce a glowing element that lives within the vertex of the V. It's pretty much a yellow gradient that lives on that left arm of the V. And it's one of the elements I'm not super sold on. Visually speaking, the glow sticks out like a sore thumb. The rest of the visual identity is very unified. Flat color, vibrant imagery, lively imagery, and pattern. And suddenly there's this gradient element, and you just gotta ask, where does it belong? Where does it come from? I mean, even in the applications that Turner Duckworth presented, that gradient sticks out. It doesn't really feel like Turner Duckworth knew what they were doing with it. It feels forced whenever I see it. I can easily see Verizon dropping this from the brand toolkit in a year or two from now. Someone must have been a really strong salesperson in those creative presentations. I'd say it's probably the weakest element in this rebrand. The glow. And speaking of Verizon removing elements, Turner Duckworth removed a lot of elements from Pentagram's 2015 rendition of the Verizon brand. The color black takes a step back in this iteration. Turner Duckworth instead relies heavily on Verizon's red to reinforce the brand's equity with the color. And you think of other telecom companies, T-Mobile, they own magenta, AT&T owns blue, Sprint. When it was a thing, they owned yellow. So Verizon is really staking its claim on red. But the big removal is the removal of Verizon's checkmark. And this is the thing that bothers me the most with this rebrand. Telecom is an interesting industry, especially here in the US. It's not like department stores where you pretty much have two players in the game here in the US, that being Target and Walmart, where you don't really need a lot to separate the two. You drive around the US and you see a big store with a blue sign. Odds are it's probably a Walmart. You drive around, you see a big store with a red sign. Odds are it's Target. And the thing with telecom, especially here in the US, is that it sees a lot of regulation. The US loves keeping telecom competitive. That's why certain mergers don't happen. That's why certain acquisitions don't happen in telecom. And because of that competition, which is pretty much guaranteed at this point, it's important to have those items in your brand toolkit that can make you identifiable. And Verizon decided to drop the one element, the biggest element that makes them identifiable, and they dropped the check mark. So much brand equity was built into that check mark. So much ability to be recognized at a glance was built into that check mark. I don't know who made the call. I don't know if Verizon put it in their brief to Turner Duckworth, or if some Turner Duckworth creative director wanted to make a bold move or anything like that. But I do know that when Verizon goes through another rebrand, that the check mark will be back. I'm very positive of that. So this gets us into the conversation of, does simplicity help or hurt a logo? Does simplicity help or hurt a brand? And to that, I'd say I think it depends on the industry. In competitive industries where it's important to stand out, where it's important to be recognizable, simplicity definitely hurts. And that's why fashion is starting to change course, right? I mean, a notoriously competitive industry. And the running joke in fashion is that, for a brief period of time, everyone had a sans serif logo. Everyone had a sans serif wordmark. Burberry looked like Yves Saint Laurent, looked like Balenciaga, looked like Chloe, so on and so forth. And that's why Burberry changed course. I mean, they learned that maybe their iconic checkmark isn't strong enough to visually support the brand. They learned that their heritage is what makes them special, and that's what informed their latest brand identity. But when it comes to industries that don't see too much competition, such as department retailers like we were talking about before, at least at this moment, you don't necessarily need a lot to separate yourself from each other. Like we mentioned earlier, you think of a blue department store, odds are you're thinking of Walmart. You think of a red department store, odds are you're thinking of Target. But that doesn't change the fact that this trend of simplification in branding is still going strong. And so when will it end? I believe that we're at a turning point with this trend. I believe that design will become more individual again, and very soon. And if you want to see what design will look like in a few years, always look at how artists are representing themselves visually. Whether you agree with me or not, artists are the tastemakers. People will follow what artists do. For example, musicians in the early 2010s, the pop acts, bands like Fun, musicians like Lorde, and even Taylor Swift. They went with that simple minimalist way of branding, and this is 2011, 2012, 2013. Cut to the mid-2010s, cut to 2015. And brands start following the artists. Google simplifies their brand look. eBay simplifies their brand look. And Verizon goes through their rebrand with Pentagram where they simplify as well. So what about here in 2024? Well, let's look at the artist. Taylor Swift. You can't really escape that bold, condensed serif logo type that has been everywhere with her in the Eras tour. Lorde now has this typography with her logo that's very experimental and fun. Fun. That band isn't around anymore. They set their world on fire and they didn't put it out. But jokes aside, expect brands to follow the artist soon. So while this Verizon rebrand is certainly interesting, I feel like it came 3 years too late. It wouldn't surprise me if they followed in the steps of Burberry and corrected course not even 5 years from now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think of this Verizon rebrand. Let me know what you think if simplicity helps or hurts a brand. Let me know. I'd love to hear. But that's all I have for you today. Be sure to like, follow, share. I've been Ziggy the Designer. If there are 2 things you need to know about me, it's that 1, I love design. And 2, I'm also very opinionated. That's all I have for y'all today. Talk with y'all later. Bye-bye.